What happens when religious rules start replacing God's actual commandments? In Matthew 15, Jesus has another dust-up with the religious elite. He calls out hypocrisy, redefines what makes someone truly clean, and rewards a persistent Gentile woman's faith in a way that just might surprise you. Let's dive in. Hi, I'm David. Welcome back to The Late Disciple, where we explore the life and teachings of Jesus with fresh eyes and open hearts. Matthew opens chapter 15 with a confrontation. Pharisees and scribes from Jerusalem raise their heads once again. They've really got their eye on Jesus at this point. This time, their beef with him is, why don't you and your disciples wash your hands before you eat? Yes, apparently their descendants become restaurant health inspectors. Now, in today's post-COVID world, this sounds like a fair question. But this wasn't about hygiene. It was about tradition. I'll point out that there was no Mosaic law requiring this practice, with the exception that priests were required to wash before they ate holy offerings. But the Pharisees were hung up on their own oral traditions that had been passed down by the rabbis over generations. These weren't laws from the Torah. These were man-made rules that had evolved to govern virtually every detail of Jewish life. Eventually, these rules would be written down in a text called the Mishnah, basically the first major compilation of what would become rabbinic law. But in Jesus' day, they were still oral, though treated as sacred. So, when the Pharisees accused Jesus' disciples of breaking tradition, Jesus turns the conversation back on them. Why do you break God's command for the sake of your tradition? What's this command he's referring to? This law, the real law, the law of Moses, says, honor your father and mother. But the rabbis have created a loophole in an instance in which someone was helping their parents economically. If that person pledged money to the temple, they could avoid financially supporting their aging parents. They called it korban, meaning a gift devoted to God. Jesus calls it what it is, hypocrisy. They're using religion to justify selfishness. Referring to the Pharisees, he quotes Isaiah. These people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Now, a quick detour. What exactly was the Mishnah? It was a compilation of oral laws developed by the rabbis to govern daily Jewish life. It included laws about how far you could walk on the Sabbath, what counted as work, how to wash your hands, and more. Some of these rules were reasonable. Others were, well, here's a few examples. You could spit on a rock on the Sabbath, but not on dirt, because that might mix and make mud, which counted as work. Women couldn't look in the mirror on the Sabbath because they might see a gray hair and be tempted to pluck it. Also work. You couldn't carry a needle in your robe on the Sabbath because that was considered a tool for labor. The list goes on and on. The issue wasn't rule-making, it was elevating man-made rules above God's commands. But now, Jesus directly answers the original challenge of the Pharisees. He calls the crowd over and says, it's not what goes into your mouth that defiles you, it's what comes out of your mouth. While this seems incredibly obvious today, this would have been shocking to a Jewish audience obsessed with clean and unclean food during this time period. Even the disciples don't quite get it, and Simon, later to be named Peter, asks Jesus to explain. So Jesus lays it out clearly. Food goes in, passes through, and it's done. But what comes out from the heart reveals who you really are. Evil thoughts, murder, adultery, theft, slander. These are what defile a person, not food that may or may not pass the 10-second rule. It's worth noting that Peter was still hung up on food laws years later, which come to a head in Acts chapter 10. Next, Jesus is traveling through the region of Tyre and Sidon, And a Canaanite woman, a Gentile, comes to him crying out for help, begging him to heal her demon-possessed daughter. At first, Jesus doesn't answer, and the disciples try to send her away. Then Jesus says something that initially feels pretty harsh. "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." But the woman doesn't give up. She kneels before him and repeats her request. Jesus responds with, "It's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." Did Jesus just call her a dog? Sorta, kinda. In the cultural context, dogs was a common metaphor Jews used for Gentiles. It was derogatory. But Jesus softens the term, using a word that could mean puppy or pet under the table. Still, it's a test. And the woman, whether she knows it or not, passes impressively when she replies, "Yes, Lord, but even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table." Her humility, her wit, and her unwavering faith move Jesus, and he praises her, telling her that her request is granted. Her daughter is healed immediately. This moment is powerful, and it shows us that Jesus came first to Israel, yes, but faith is what moves him, not lineage. And this Gentile woman, an outsider, understood his mercy better than many insiders, aka lost sheep of Israel. We end with a scene that should feel familiar. Crowds following Jesus, healing, and another miracle in the form of the provisioning of food. Upon resting on a mountainside, Jesus is once again healing a large crowd, and after they've been with him for 3 days with nothing to eat, he tells his disciples he doesn't want to send them away until they've been fed. Now remember, the disciples just saw Jesus feed 5,000 people with 5 loaves and 2 fish. And yet the disciples ask, "Where are we going to get enough food to feed all these people?" But Jesus doesn't scold them. He takes 7 loaves and a few small fish, gives thanks, breaks them, and feeds 4,000 men, not counting women and children. And again there are leftovers, 7 baskets this time. Jesus meets physical needs. He meets spiritual needs. He meets people where they are. And in every miracle, every conversation, he's pulling back the curtain just a little more on who he truly is. Matthew 15 gives us a full spectrum of human nature juxtaposed against divine nature. We see religious pride and humble faith. We see man-made traditions and God-given truth. We see spiritual blindness and surprising clarity from unlikely people. And we're reminded that what defiles us isn't what we eat or the rituals we keep. It's what comes from our heart. And when we humble ourselves, whether we're Jews, Gentiles, insiders, or outsiders, there's always grace at the table. Even the crumbs are enough. In the next episode, we'll step into Matthew chapter 16, where Simon makes the boldest confession of all and finally gets his new name, Peter. If this episode challenged or encouraged you, give it a like. Share it with someone who needs it. And don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and remember, we are all disciples. It is never too late.